Welcome, everyone. This is Our Souls Speak. We're in constellation in divine space. We convene with our souls to listen, share, and explore. Our Souls Speak, a podcast where together with our guests, we embody the soulful principles of oneness and sourceness.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Our Souls Speak. It's my honor to introduce my friend, Gerti Schoen. Gerti worked as a psychotherapist in the New York City area for over 20 years and was also trained as a psychedelic integration therapist to work with the effects of mind-altering substances. We met in August of 22 in Ecuador. And after that, you moved back to your home country of Germany. Your mushroom of the heart is Amanita Muscaria, which has opened doors to a deep connection with the natural world and its sacred magic. Welcome, Gerti.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Great to be in your presence.
I always smile when I connect with you because there's such a funny story connected to our retreat in Ecuador. I hope we can talk a bit about it. Hello, Lorna and Barry and Bill. It's nice to meet you too.
Yeah, lovely to meet you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey from psychotherapy to your love of mushrooms?
Yeah, that's a big topic. Well, what I'm seeing since I connected with the mushroom and psychedelic medicines, that's what I've been doing. I kind of left the traditional psychotherapy behind, and now I work as a facilitator who introduces people to mushrooms and their healing effects. And a lot of people come to me because they're disillusioned with traditional therapeutic methods. I know what they're talking about. I used to be mainly a talk therapist in New York City. I did some other things like meditation, energy work, but you constantly bump up against the limitation of how much healing there is possible with these conventional methods. And I don't want to diss their efficacy because they can do a lot, especially when it comes to the constant confusion that most people really suffer from, that these therapies can do a lot in terms of insight and learning about themselves. When it comes to healing, that's where the limitations become obvious. People carry around the same triggers year after year after year, carry them into their relationships, can't seem to get rid of them. It can be mitigated, but it's almost impossible to fully heal them. And that's what these substances can do. And I've worked almost exclusively with Amanita Muscaria, which is really a healing mushroom. It can heal so much, not just emotional stuff, but physical conditions as well. And I see over and over how people are finally letting go of these burdens that they've been carrying around forever, and they don't fall back into old ways of thinking. They can finally let go. And that's one of the big problems we have, that we keep obsessing about the same stuff and we just can't really forgive, including ourselves most of the time. That's what these beings really do so well. And it happens quite reliably, I have to say. So that's the big journey. And it also led me to connect with the natural world in a whole different way, but that's another story.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that before we go further, about how they do connect you with the natural world and that wisdom of interconnectedness.
Well, what these mushrooms and substances also do is they really bring you back in touch with your intuition, with your heart, because we're so cognitively driven. That's what our societies want from us: function and be productive. And we kind of don't really learn how to be intuitive. from the outside world. And that's what these substances do very well, that all of a sudden people start to have hunches again and really listen to their gut feeling and make decisions from intuitive knowing rather than cognitive analysis, and trust that. That's the big trick, as you all know, to trust these informations that come through all the time. And that's what the mushroom supports, that it not just heals things that hold us back, but it has this enormous energy of support that comes from the inside, because we all feel so unsupported and are unsupported most of the time in the outside world. And the mushroom brings this enormous energy. Like when I first took a microdose of Amanita Muscaria, I was doing my thing and I don't know what I was thinking, but I ingested it and was kind of feeling myself, what's happening. And all of a sudden it was like, like my spine all of a sudden straightened. And the mushroom was like, no, we're not doing that. You know, that usual kind of thinking of, oh, it's all crap and life is hard. But, you know, you start to think differently, and includes your posture. And it really comes from the inside. And this inner foundation that's being rebuilt or supported also then catapults you into the other worlds. And my main passion is to teach people how to connect with the natural world again, what indigenous people know how to do and have known forever. And we used to know that too, a long time ago, that everything's alive and everything supports us and everything has a spirit and everything communicates and wants to communicate. And that's what people learn to do again.
When we connected a few days ago, you told me this beautiful story which birthed the theme that you wanted to speak to about allowing our sacred rainmaker to create. And it was about you connecting with the grasshoppers. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, that's one of the really cool stories that came out of all this. I started to go outside. A lot of modern people will not go out because we're so glued to our devices and our comforts. And one of the things I also observed, and I used to do that for a long, long time, is that we tend to connect with the other beings through our energy field mainly. And one of the things I've learned from the people that teach me is that the material world is not unimportant in this process, that if we go outside and spend time in the woods and do dirt time, as it is also called, the whole connection gets a whole different boost, that the spiritual connection is already there, and you can do that from your armchair. We can do that from anywhere. When we're outside and really can touch and sense and smell the trees and the waters and everything, there's a whole jolt of additional energy that really makes a big difference in reestablishing this communication. So I finally got myself outside, and when the weather is beautiful like it is now, it's not hard. And as soon as you start to do it, you're being pulled outside. In the beginning, it's more like, okay, I gotta do it. You know, the only way to connect is to go outside. I really would rather stay indoors, but all right then. And after maybe a week or 2 or 3, the nature beings start to pull you outside. They want you to come and they want you to see them and touch them and talk to them. And then you don't have to muster all this energy by yourself, but it's kind of this two-way street. And I started to bike a lot and walk a lot and do a lot of mindful walking, like be really slow, and a lot of sitting. Much of the connection, that because they're so subtle, much of the times you really have to just be still, especially if you want to connect to animals. And one evening when I went outside, and it was at the height of the summer, and the fields were already ready to be harvested, and there was this warm glow in the air. I went outside and I was struck by the silence. And at some point I remembered, well, when I was a kid, there used to be all these grasshoppers and cicadas, and there were all these concerts and sounds and symphonies that were performed by these animals. And I was sad. I was sad that I didn't hear anything. I heard something way in the distance on a different mountain, but not in the neighborhood. And one of the things I find so incredibly powerful when I read about indigenous wisdom is that they can bring back species that have left us. There's a beautiful story about salmon returning to Western America after a dam was torn down. And I feel very inspired by that and very hopeful by these stories, because Native Americans know how to keep these stories alive and how to stay connected to the other worlds. So I started to pray and ask for the grasshoppers if they felt so inclined to come back. If there's anything I can do, anything I can offer for them to return. And I said a lot of prayers and made some offerings in the form of herbs and incense. And then next day I went to a sacred spring that I have developed a relationship with and that has healed illness for me and many other people. And when I walked back from that visit, a grasshopper landed on my leg, and I was on the bike, so it was kind of clinging to my leg, even though I went pretty fast. And I was like, okay, you can stay there, but the wind is pretty stiff, if you can sit there for a while. And then another grasshopper jumped right into my path, and I hit the brakes pretty intensely, almost fell from the bike. And I climbed down and went face to face with the grasshopper and tried to listen. Is there anything to hear or to perceive? And I heard, "Thank you." And I was very touched. And the other grasshopper that sat on my leg then jumped off. And I went back home. And that evening I went back out at sunset to the fields. And I was listening, and I was very intent on, did anything happen? And the grasshoppers had come back. And they were performing and they were chirping, and there was a whole big noise. And I was so touched. I was so touched by their gift, because it was really them who gave this gift to us. And ever since, I feel very close to them. And I started to think, well, if I can do it, we can all start doing it again.
How do you allow that sacred rainmaker to, or how do you embody that?
Oh, right, the rainmaker. Totally got off track there.
Oh no, the story is about the rainmaker. Yeah.
Yeah, it was about the grasshoppers and the rainmakers, and it's connected because the sacred spring I used to go to when I met the grasshoppers was my introduction to connecting to the waters. And it started with just drinking water from that spring. I had asthma at the time, and when I visited once, it was in the winter when it's aggravated. I was praying, for healing, and I heard somebody cough, and I was like, there's nobody around. Like, I didn't see anyone. And that was maybe my first audible communication, like actual sound that I heard from the other worlds that led me to communicate with the water. And I was instructed to drink the water for my asthma, which I did, I believe, for 10 days or 2 weeks. And it went away. It just went away. And from then on, I went down there frequently, and I brought offerings and prayers. And that chapel, there's a chapel built on top of the spring that is dedicated to the Great Mother. So I did a lot of offerings, a lot of prayers to her. And one of the things I learned is that all waters are connected. Once you're connected to one spring, you're connected to all water, not just in our bodies, but to the rains and the rivers and all water. And they communicate constantly. They're always talking to each other. And they relay a lot of information that's freely available if we tune in. And recently, a few months ago, I moved to a different place, a different mountain. And for some reason, I felt drawn to explore the springs on this mountain. And you can look on the map in Germany, there's all kinds of markers. It says this spring and that well. So I just walked from spring to spring and tried to connect with them. And 7 of them are in my area, and almost all of them are dried up or just a trickle or polluted, not in good shape. And I learned that there are water keepers, indigenous folks and other people too, know how to tend to springs. And when we do that, they feel seen and heard and loved. And I started to walk around all these springs and bring flowers and sing songs, whatever I can offer. And while I was doing that, I had these doubts, like, the material world will instill in us, well, what am I doing here? I really need to be trained to be a water keeper or a rainmaker. And I used to be part of a shamanic center in upstate New York that was connected to an indigenous tribe in Central America that still knows how to train rainmakers. And at the time, I kind of inquired, how do you even learn how to be a rainmaker? And there are very steep requirements, like the founder of this lineage, who was an indigenous man, very powerful rainmaker. He was struck by lightning, and he spent years in a coma and learned how to communicate with the weather beings. And that was one example of what qualifies you, that you somehow had intense encounters with the weather beings for you to be called to become that, or other weather events. And I didn't have any. I never had any of these encounters. I just have a deep desire to learn how to do that. So I just started to bring flowers and made offerings. And I then applied to become a rainmaker, and was not outwardly rejected, but not responded to. So I just started doing it myself and kept going to these springs and praying for rain. We had very dry winter. All the reservoirs are low, and people start talking about rain, which is very unusual. Usually everybody talks about wanting sun, and all of a sudden people want rain. And I prayed a lot, and I imagine there's lots of people, especially farmers. and other earth keepers praying for rain. And lo and behold, since about a month or so, we have frequent bouts of rain. Often it's gentle rain, sometimes it's just a squirt, sometimes it's big thunderstorms. Right now we are in a massive weather depression. There's supposed to be hail. And when I kept walking around my spring walk, the mountain is starting to spit water. Like I see these puddles once in a while that haven't been there the last time I walked around and there hadn't been rain. And then the puddle dries up and then I walk further and then there's another puddle and it's kind of spit out as an offering to the animals, which is how I see it, because you see the tracks of the animal footprints and they need water. And then that dries up. And so I'm starting to see movement. And that's how I do it. And my dream is that many people will start to develop these relationships again out of their own curiosity and out of their own desire to reconnect.
Well, I'm wondering how this is resonating with everyone, and what is coming up for me is that we are in relationship with source, with nature. I oftentimes felt like we were at the mercy of it. But when we connect, then we become a part of the creation. I'm just going to send that out to the group and see what's resonating with everyone else.
If I may, one thing that really comes to mind is the people that don't know how to meditate. I find a lot of people that claim this, they don't know how to meditate, but they can walk in nature and get immense peace. And to me, I ask them, well, what's the difference?
What's the difference to you?
What the difference is to me, there is no difference. You're connecting.
Yeah, that's wonderful. There is that whole thing around still mind. And I've meditated for 10 years in a Buddhist Zen community. And then after I stopped, developed a very busy mind again. So if you don't keep doing it, you're not safe from all this. And yes, there is that. When you go out, you do just ground yourself and center yourself and become calmer. It doesn't automatically take care of the thoughts. And sometimes, you keep churning your stuff. And I've resisted a long time this practice of doing sense meditations. That's one of my practice, that I go outside and I tune into all the senses, and we have a lot more senses than the usual 5. And when we do that, we really become present. And a person I used to work with once said, who was a very skilled nature communicator, he once said, well, this whole idea of perfection and having to have a perfect still mind, it's not really necessary. You can still have a low level chatter moving through and still connect with the nature beings. And that is true. And the more we can get the mind to calm down and tune into the senses, the more animals will show up. Like they know whether you think or you're preoccupied or not. The quieter your mind is, the deeper the connection, and that too is true. There's a lot of nodding. Do you find that too, Greg?
Definitely. On my walks every morning with Oscar, we've encountered some beings lately.
What really resonated with me, Gerti, is when you're saying that there's a phase of the will to go outside, the will to get out of bed, the will to go out we're in the UK, so in all weathers. And certainly now, I dropped my daughter off at school this morning and went down to the lakes with the trees, and the swans and the birds and the ducks were there, and the wind was in the trees. And I was just walking, I felt like I was the only person there, and just it's like being in the most exquisitely beautiful art that's in 3-4 dimensions. And what I'm really getting enormous benefit from is this sense and feeling I've had is you actually naming what's actually happening, because I can sense and feel it in a general sense, but listening to you speak about communing and communicating and being communicated with, and certainly for me, being more conscious of stopping for a while, offering something back, it made me realize I feel like I go down and I'm taking to some extent. I'm going down there to get something, but what am I actually offering? So it's just so beautiful to hear you speak from your heart about these profound truths that all of us have access to relatively. Thank you so much.
I think, Gerti, as well, you mentioned walking, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's undisputable evidence that walking barefoot synchronizes our circadian rhythm in the body, which aids us to get out of fight or flight response and aids better sleep, and just basically connects us to the earth. So this is just more testament from a scientific perspective that it actually works.
That's really cool. Have you tried it?
I have. Weather permitting in the UK, yes. Now, I haven't done it recently, but last year I did it almost thrice a day for about 4 or 5 months.
And your sleep became better?
Sleep became better, and even during seemingly difficult times, my rhythm of my body and everything wouldn't get into stress or too much stress.
Yeah, that's lovely. I didn't know that about the circadian rhythms. I know that there's a study or several studies that when you dig your hands in the dirt, like when you garden, your skin absorbs certain chemicals that are similar to antidepressants. So you don't need to swallow pills, right? You can just dig in the dirt. Probably a lot more fun.
What comes to mind immediately is a little boy and it probably is me, just having his hands and digging around, and then all of a sudden looking at his hands and feeling really proud, and his mum's like, no, but that's what we naturally sort of gravitate as in our childlike self, because we're in tune.
Totally. Yeah. Whenever I bring up something like that, people will remember that they cooked, grass soup when they were children. Or, caught frogs and then released them back into the water, or, whatever it is they did. The children or still know when we let them how to connect that way. And it's so much fun. Once you start doing it, you get such an energy into your body and such a childlike curiosity if we let it, because this mind that wants to get back to the smartphone and to the emails and whatnot is so powerful, but it develops its own energy, and after you're over the hump, becomes such a desire to reconnect with the natural world. And I mean, the question is always, why does one do that, right? Yeah, of course, it's a spiritual practice, and it's what we would do automatically if our minds were unpolluted. But there's such a wholeness in that. We often feel so unnurtured and unsupported, and all we learn to do is to get support from other humans if we can get it, because everybody's totally stressed out and overstretched these days anyway. And we totally neglect that we can get so much support from, or by leaning against the tree, or by holding a flower, or by really sitting for a while and watch until the squirrel comes back. There's such an energetic nurturance that we lack, or that we voluntarily said no to, more or less. And when we can reintegrate that, there's such support I mean, beyond what we get anyway, from the veggies in the supermarket and the air we breathe, we get that anyway, but it's not conscious. We just take it for granted. And when you really pay attention, even to insects, I find insects incredibly interesting lately. That's something I would have never done years ago. To watch a beetle and how beautiful they are sometimes. They have some of them have these luminescent green wings, or some of them are bright red and beautiful dark blue. I had no idea how beautiful they are and how much they support the ecosystem just by existing. And I just read another article yesterday how insects are in such decline. And that's my fantasy, that the better I can get at this creating piece of it, maybe we can call back the insects. Maybe we can call back other species that have already gone.
What comes to mind is I don't know too much about this subject, but apparently the bees are critical in the ecosystem. Do you know anything more about that? Could you share?
I mean, the bees are horribly threatened because of fertilizers and poisons we use in agriculture. That's the reason for the decline, even though in scientific articles you read, for reasons still unknown. I mean, it's not that hard to connect the dots. I've also read articles that there are efforts to build mini computers that can fly and can do the pollination and can do the job of bees. That's ignoring the heart of it all, the oneness of it all that you are so familiar with. Maybe machines can pollinate some flowers if we really do a lot of research. They cannot connect with the web of life. Computers cannot connect with the web of life and cannot contribute their energy and their love and their sacrifice and their desire to be a part of all this. And bees, I mean, they're such an important piece of the puzzle in this whole web. They need wildflowers. And it's so easy to plant a bunch of seeds and grow wildflowers. Do it on your balcony and just do it in a flower pot, and they will come. They will come. You can call them. I haven't specifically worked with bees yet or worked with birds. Like when I first moved here, usually people hang out bird feeders and bird baths, and then it takes weeks and weeks for them to show up. You can call them, you can invite them to show up and really extend that desire to form a relationship and to honor their beauty and their existence, and they will come. It's all just a matter of connecting. I imagine it's the same with bees. It's a nice project. Thing to get started with.
In your relationship with the natural world and the animals and insects and birds, you give to them and you receive to them. Can you talk a little bit about that interconnectedness?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because that's really the most important aspect of all this. The key word is reciprocity, because we live in a consumer society. I'm in Germany, you're in the US, some of you are in the UK. We learn that everything can be bought or acquired. Every medicine, is already prepared, and your doctor tells you how much to take and how often. So there's all this external expertise that tells you this is what you should do. And that contributes to losing that connection, that there's all these experts. We used to have that expertise ourselves. early humans knew exactly what herbs to go to when they had an illness or an injury. Not just the shamans, but everybody. The shamans were just the first experts that we created. But step by step, we outsourced all this expertise to specialists. And with it came this whole consumer mentality of, yeah, give me your medicine. And if it doesn't work, I'll throw you away. And we just consume. And it's a one-way street. And in any animistic or shamanic traditions, reciprocity is really the foundational principle, that it's not just us ingesting something, but that these medicines and beings want something back. They want our gratitude. They want our appreciation. They want to be acknowledged for what they have to give. And that's what ceremony is, really, is to express all that, to honor them for what they give every day and all time without asking. And that is what has to return, is that appreciation. So those beings feel taken care of, just like the caretakers of springs. There's caretakers of forests and of gardens and of landscapes. And I used to, when I was in America and part of that shamanic retreat center, there was every spring people would prepare the grounds for visitors, and we would mow the lawn and clean up and weed and all these things. And of course, there's always lots of weeds, and especially ivy was very prevalent there. So the question is, we're a shamanic community. What do we do about these plants that we call invasive? And then the head shaman would go and talk to the ivy and say, okay, so what do you want? What can we do? How do we deal with this? How can we combine our interest with yours? Not long after she came back and she said, the ivy is happy to move or to be reduced. They just wanted to be asked. And that's really at the core of all this, to acknowledge their existence, to acknowledge their spirit. They will work with us. They will, hear us out and try to understand what we're trying to do. It's just a matter of starting the communication again. They say everything always communicates, but we humans have taken ourselves out of the equation.
Completely resonates with me because I have a garden, which I speak to every day, I'm in every day. It's me, I'm it, which is kind of how I feel about the earth too, that the earth is in me and I'm in the earth. Source is in me, I'm in source. And it's really fascinating. This garden has taught me a whole bunch of things that my previous garden didn't teach me. I almost have the opposite problem, if I'm honest. Sometimes I can't go out because it's so loud out there. There's so much out there. And it's all, like, do this, like, move me. Why are you leaving me? Come on, I need some, it's like, it's so much out there that I almost, I'm sitting here, I've been in the office, and it's like, okay, we want you outside. Oh, okay. So it's a lovely, beautiful experience to be guided into how to garden by the garden itself. I've planted so many plants, and they've said, well, what are you putting that there for? That is not going to be happy there. You really need to move it. And why did you buy that anyway? It's heavy Hereford clay, so they're absolutely soaking wet, or it's really dry. Like right now, there's huge cracks in the ground. And yes, I've been asking for rain, praying for rain, and all of that. And it has come. And it's interesting that it mostly comes at night, which I think is kind of interesting. Apparently it downpours at night, but you don't know it. Totally, all of this resonates to me, and it's fascinating to hear you speak about it in the way you have. I have a question I'd like to ask, which is because I really feel the mushrooms, the Amanita Muscaria, and I connected with the consciousness of it earlier today, which was amazing and helpful because I suffer from a form of arthritis, which is about inflammation, and the consciousness told me that inflammation is their specialty. And I said, yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much. What can I do for you? I wonder how does Amanita Muscaria support you, and how do you support it on an ongoing basis? So I'm really curious as to how I can likewise support it on an ongoing basis. Now that it's within its consciousness is whatever it's done in my system, it is in my system.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's wonderful that you had such an immediate connection. That seems to be one of the hallmark signs of the mushroom, that she's so approachable. I call her a she, Amanita Muscaria. She also has a lot of masculine qualities. I teach people how to microdose with Amanita Muscaria, using her as a medicine. And by approaching her, people learn how to intuitively figure out what is needed, what their dosage is, what their mode of preparation is. So the intuitive piece is built in, and I've recently started training other healers in working with the mushroom so they can work with their clients. So one of the ways I honor her is to spread the news. I believe that that is one of their desires, to want to be seen again. The Amanita muscaria is somewhat toxic. It's not deadly, but there's some toxicity there. And there's ways how to work with that so it becomes a medicine. Poison is the medicine, as we know, in the right dose. So she wants to be seen and heard again by many, many people. We all, or the healers everywhere on the globe, used to work with the mushroom thousands and thousands of years ago. There's still some folk traditions in Eastern Europe, and some indigenous traditions too, who still work with the mushroom. And I believe that she likes to be adored. I think that's what we can give her. You know, I have 2 altars here, 2 altars and several free-floating statues of the mushroom. So she's everywhere. And just like humans, we like to be seen and acknowledged too. And that's what we can give in return. That's how we support them. And they've missed us, you know. We've worked with them and had close relationships for a long, long time, until they were outlawed and deemed, you know, deadly and whatnot. And they want us to reconnect. They've missed us. And they are happy that this connection is starting up again.
Thank you. I will go into the garden and ask how I can make a place for them, to a place that they'll like to be. And
yes,
maybe they'll come in.
I'm sure they will. If you
Well,
have they live in symbiosis with birch trees and firs, particular conifer trees.
Yeah.
So they need certain trees in order to grow.
I've just planted last year 6 birch trees and about 6 conifers. So
Wow.
that's source working through me, isn't it? That's just perfect planning on Source's part.
Yeah, no coincidences. You are being called.
Gerti, if
That starts.
if you had 3 wishes for us humans in relation to honoring nature, what would those 3 wishes be?
How can we honor nature? Gratitude. That's the number 1 energy. To just be in gratitude, to remember over and over and over and over and over 5 million times a day that there's so much to be grateful for. And it changes your energy when you get into it, when you can remember. And when your energy changes, everything changes. You guys know that. Everybody who listens to this podcast knows that. Water, I mean, I'm so taken and I feel so pulled by water, because it's in our bodies, because it's everywhere, because it has become so, or it is becoming so rare. The rains, not everywhere, but I mean, that's where we're heading, is towards dryness. And to your waters, when you take a shower, say thank you. When you drink a glass of water, appreciate that it keeps us alive.
So that's beautiful. I'm feeling like we are called to end with another moment or two of silence to give thanks for those beautiful things you just mentioned, and to perhaps ask for the things you've spoken about today, if we feel called to. Shall we do that to finish off? Okay,
Yes.
let's do that then. Thank you so very much. I'm so very grateful to you, Gerti, for joining us today, sharing.
Thank you.
You're
I
so
am so very grateful to all of you for attending and tending to this mission. We're all on the same page. I very much appreciate all of you.
we're very appreciative of you too. Yeah.
Such a blessing to be in your presence today, Gerti.
Definitely.
Much love, Gerti.
Thank you so much. Thank
Lots
you
of love.
for supporting us. May the mushroom be with you.
It's already. That's a lovely. I think we should get a T-shirt made. That would be perfect. May the mushroom be with you. Oh, super.
To receive more information about our guests and future events, please visit our website at sourceness.one. We are one.